Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Have a good one for you as always. On the show today, Joe Biden is inviting President of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, to town. Just came out right in the wake of the controversial speech from the President of Israel, Isaac Herzog, that's coming later this week. Also, we talk about Jerome Powell. He has his prize labor market back under control. We got the inflation going down. We have unemployment staying relatively solid. But the big question is, can he hold on to it? That landing. It's coming. It's coming. It's getting so close. Oh, it's tantalizing. Also, we'll take a look at Ron DeSantis. More exploits from him from the campaign. Things aren't going good, and things are not really going good as well with his private army, actually. That is not turning out to be too big of a hit, even for him in Florida. Also, a great piece from Current Affairs on the failures of AOC and how she went. There's a pretty killer line here. It went from influencer to influenced. All right, so with that being said, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. So Benjamin Netanyahu is coming to Israel for the first time since he re-entered office in December, easing months of tension between the two leaders. It's always been kind of an interesting relationship between Israel and the United States, to say the least, especially in recent years, and especially with Benjamin Netanyahu, because of the fact that really it used to be that for a very long period of time, it was that Israel was kind of an unquestioned source of support. You always had to be behind Israel no matter what, no matter who you are. And Benjamin Netanyahu was really the first person to make that really untenable by really making direct attacks against Barack Obama when he was in office. Because, of course, Netanyahu has held onto power. So I love the people who are just like, oh, we just got to get Netanyahu out. That's the real thing. There's a reason. There is a big, fat reason why he's been in power in Israel for the last 20 years, essentially uninterrupted. With a few Lapid breaks in there, and that is because they love him in Israel. He's doing what they want. He is expanding the country in the way they want. He is excluding the people who. And taking away rights from people who the large majority of the country wants rights to be taken away from. So there is no problem there. They're not going to have any sort of problem. They're going to have sort of issue or beef when it comes to dealing with dealing in any way with the settlers and the Palestinians enhancing settlements, all these crimes that they're doing. And Joe Biden and Barack Obama before him have had the kind of pretty unfortunate problem, I guess it's unfortunate for them, of being cast as not the best supporters of Israel, even though they essentially are lockstep. It still is kind of a unique party situation. I mean, I think Obama maybe said a harsh word, and then essentially Netanyahu kind of turned on him and picked sides essentially. So essentially Netanyahu's office said that Biden made the invitation in a warm and long phone call on Monday evening on the eve of a visit to Washington by Isaac Herzog, the Israeli president, that had until Monday been widely seen as a slight to Netanyahu. The invitation reversed Biden's decision in March to avoid meeting Netanyahu in the near term. Biden recently described Netanyahu's coalition as one of the most extremist since the 1970s and voiced particular opposition to Netanyahu's decision to undermine the power of Israel's Supreme Court, build more Israeli homes in the occupied West Bank, and retroactively authorize Israeli settlements built in the territory without government approval. So again, they essentially, there's essentially mind lock. They're in the same place, the Israeli government and the Israeli settlers, and that is obviously being proven time and time again. But, it's kind of difficult. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this, because I think that will tell us more as to the true nature of this relationship, as to, why it is being done, what is the impetus for this invitation. because it does say that Biden invited Netanyahu. What is he trying to get out of the situation, or more accurately, what are his aides trying to get out of the situation? Are they trying to, kind of reframe the relationship, ask them to do something more, maybe with regards to Ukraine? What can they really push up, or is it really just like, please like me, I'm sorry, I don't want to, I'm sorry that I did all of what I did, I'm sorry I criticize you in any way, because honestly, I would not be surprised if that is a little bit of what it is, just to kind of, smooth it over, say, hey, we're good, because, it's essentially what Biden did with Saudi Arabia. He again, from the pariah comments during the campaign to meeting with MBS multiple times, it's just been a complete embarrassment, a complete kowtow. And then, if there's anything, like that, if there's any common theme, or that is what's going on here, we should expect to see Netanyahu kind of openly thwarting and, shit talking Biden within the next few months. So, the announcement came as a disappointment to Israel's opposition, who's called on the Biden administration to take an even stronger stance against Netanyahu's judicial overhaul. This is what they're having all these quote-unquote pro-democracy protests about there in Israel. So Netanyahu, again, leading the most right-wing government in Israel's history. No date has yet been set for Netanyahu's visit, and it was unclear whether his invitation was to visit the White House or another part of the country. But the invitation removes some of the tension that has overshadowed Tuesday's visit by Herzog, who will meet Biden before giving a joint address to Congress on Wednesday. The bipartisan welcome for Herzog, whose position is largely ceremonial, reflects how the United States government sees Israel as a key strategic and military ally in the Middle East. The United States provides Israel's with nearly $3.8 billion in annual aid, large amounts of weapons and defense technology, extensive diplomatic cover at the United Nations Security Council, and crucial assistance in building new alliances with Arab countries. I mean, this is a very, very big, key list of things. So again, huge amounts of weapons, defense technology, and enabled the thriving Israeli economy to build some pretty brutal weapons of their own. As a matter of fact, you got also large amounts of weapons and defense technology in and of itself, and critically, diplomatic cover both at the UN and getting these, shall we say, suspect suspect morally kings of the Gulf states, the UAEs of the world, the Qatars, and all those people who in the Abraham Accords. To kind of normalize relations. That's been a big win for Israel as well diplomatically. Also, at the UN, can't underrate that nearly enough. And again, the question is, what is the United States getting in return? Because this is a thing that has to be it's not just I think for the kind of cold hard realpolitik part of it, I think it's becoming less and less clear. Sure, we got a kind of a proxy state. A tag team partner in that region, a guaranteed tag team partner in that region. That could be very, very helpful. But I think it's certainly trending. I may be wrong. I may be kind of, this may be a little bit of wishful thinking, but I would kind of say that we are almost at a hinge point between a lot of what we see in Israel and, a lot of what we see in the relationship between Israel and the United States, because we just list off this great New York Times paragraph, essentially lists off all the things that Israel gets from the United States, but what are they getting in return? Is it just we got the tag team partner in there, or is it something deeper? There's less and less kind of happening that we're interested in. We don't have troops nearly as much as we used to in the Middle East anymore. And we've had troops there going back to the 1970s. So and before. But really, since the Soviet-Afghan War, which was a pretty big thing that we kind of really stuck our toes in there in the Middle East at that time, and have worked in with Israel and a bunch of any number of things. And again, I guess having another kind of country that we can have under our thumb. I mean, those are some of the ways that we can go about it. But there's been times, just like with Saudi Arabia, that Israel has very much so openly kind of spurned the United States, and they have so much leverage the United States does in terms of what we provide for them. It's just really hard to see increasingly what we are getting in return here. Despite the friction with Netanyahu, Biden's administration has continued to ward off measures against Israel at the UN over its treatment of Palestine. The White House is also investing considerable support in mediating a normalization of diplomatic ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia. So continuing Biden there is a Trump policy, what would be a major situation if Saudi and Israel were to cool ties, or kind of Abraham Accords it, if you will, because I think it is very very important that there is that is, and it's also very important for Netanyahu that he gets this done. Again, we kind of saw during the World Cup. It was in Qatar. It was one of the states that normalized relations under the Abraham Accords, and it was the entire country of Qatar. There was multiple instances of them of kind of showing out for Palestine, things like that. And of course, those two countries kind of getting up, kind of tied together would be something that would be probably up the United States' interest as well, with some of their priorities that they have. And let's see here. Washington is also balked at some of the comments of Netanyahu's most extreme cabinet colleagues, in particular Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, who said at the Israeli state should erase a Palestinian town at the center of recent violence. A spokesman for the State Department, Ned Price, called those comments irresponsible, disgusting, and repugnant. So again, two big questions here. The first is, or two big points. Bottom line is, they are going to continue what they, always did and always have done and always will do, which is, they'll say, when someone like Bezalel Smotrich, who everyone kind of agrees is crazy, at least in the mainstream kind of liberal establishment, everyone agrees is crazy. I mean, I'm sure Trump would invite him to the White House, no questions asked, but, everyone kind of in polite Israeli American society agrees that guy is crazy. But when something like that happens and they literally do erase the town from existence, at a slower pace, they won't just bomb it all, but they bulldoze the roads enough times, destroy enough buildings, the town functionally is gone. That is going to be allowed to happen, no questions asked, by the United States and by people like Ned Price. And he then will be coming out sneering to reporters who may dare to ask him any kind of questions about it, while, the violence and destruction continue to go on unabated in Israel. And the other part of this is, the big other part of this is, again, what is the United States getting in return here? Why has Biden called this meeting? And, those I think are two questions that are still unanswered as we get into kind of, I think, a new page, the post-war on terror page of the United States-Israel relationship. With that being said, we can take a quick break and go on to our next story. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and supporting Newsflash. We now have a brand new way for you to be heard if you want, whether a text message or a audio message. Please, no video messages. I really just do not think that's necessary. We have a new feedback box open for you. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially open. SWRN702@gmail.com. Send a text message, send a voice message of no more than 30 seconds via the voice memos function. Either of those two options, and we will 100%, not going to find this guarantee anywhere else. We're going to play it on the show, listen to what you have to say, and it literally could be about anything. Well, if it's inappropriate, we won't play it, but it could be about anything. Thank you so much. This is my thank you to all the listeners who have stuck out with us and want to have their own voice in the show. SWRN702@gmail.com is the address. All right, so let's get into our next story here. A pretty important one. We talked about it a week or so ago with Jack Negro about the small landing here. The soft landing with Jerome Powell. And it looks more and more like it just might be happening. Let's take this here to the New York Times. So really, it seems like in terms of, Jerome Powell, I guess, in 2020, September 2020, before he started this, inflation attack program, he said, "We're so eager to get back to the economy, get back to a tight labor market with low unemployment, high labor force precipitation, rising all the virtuous factors that we had as recently as last winter, Powell said in an NPR interview in September of 2020. The Fed chair has gotten that wish. The labor market has recovered by nearly every major measure, and that employment rate for people in their active working years has eclipsed its 2019 high, reaching a level last seen in April of 2001. Yet one of the biggest risks to that strong rebound has, as one of the biggest themes of the show, by the way, for the last few years, has been Jerome Powell's Fed itself. Economists have spent months predicting the workers will not be able to hang on to all their recent labor market gains because the Fed has aggressively began attacking rapid inflation by raising interest rates sharply to cool off the economy and the job market, a campaign that many economists predicted could push unemployment higher and even plunge America into a recession. But so far, the workers have held strong. They've kept moving. They've kept being active, keep trying to switch jobs, the hiring, and the leverage that workers had, essentially that there are more job openings than there are kind of workers to fill them. That does give workers a lot of leverage, and that's something that they've been exercising, especially the low wage workers, at least for the past period of time, kind of post pandemic, early 2021 till today. The central bank has again raised rates. But now a tantalizing possibility is emerging. Can America both tame inflation and keep its labor market gains? I think this is going to be a really kind of critical and interesting point to delve into here, because this is kind of something that this is the kind of make or break moment. Inflation has just dropped remarkably. I think it's at 3% now, way down from what everyone expected. The jobs market last month was not that impressive. It was still a solid addition, but it was a little bit lower than what was expected. The months before, it's kind of been, solid addition, kind of back and forth. But we could be looking at kind of teetering over the edge to a more significant drop in jobs added to the economy over the years in terms of net jobs added. So that could be a risk that a lot of people, if I ask someone on the street, the working class, just generally, I think that's a risk that they would not want the Fed chair to take. They would say, you know what, let's, cool off, maybe start to bring interest rates back down a little bit, and let's, respond to some of the working conditions. Inflation, just hovering over that 2% mark. And if we continue to, keep these rates this high, put more pressure on companies, making the flow of the economy less, more and more constricted, that could put, well past the point of, inflation being a problem, then I think, then I think it makes it clear you have ulterior reasons, you have ulterior motivations that come into play. And that is to take away worker power, take away especially low-wage worker power to ask for better wages, to switch jobs, to have that leverage that they've been having since the end of the pandemic. And, I think that will make it clear for everyone. I think that's going to be a really, really interesting thing to watch come the next Fed meeting about what they'll do. Right. Yeah, so I have pulled into this someone who has been following this very, very closely, and that is I got my father, Nicholas Walsh, on the line. Thank you so much for just stopping in here. So you've seen the numbers. You've seen that inflation continue to and really fall a lot last month. And maybe, I don't know if it's fair. I don't know if you would agree with this, but, jobs definitely starting to cool off. The last month, nothing too crazy. Still an addition, still a pretty significant addition, but nothing too crazy. What do you think the Federal Reserve does here, and what do you think they should do?
I think they're going to maybe raise rates one or two more times, depending on what numbers come in. But they're going to, after that, stop and see what shakes out, meaning how the economy starts looking. There's a lot of people in interest rate speculation in the market is that they'll, once that is finished, rates will have to start being cut, which is not unprecedented, but it is certainly unusual for it to
once what is finished, the inflation drop.
Like, let's say they go raise rates two more times, so that'll be through the end of the summer, and then in the interest rates market, you can see what the predictions are for the market. Sort of forecasts what the Fed funds rate, their key rate, what that's going to be in the next up to about a year, and even farther out than that. So that futures market is projecting a 50 to 75 basis point lower Fed funds rate than we have now. So in other words, it's forecasting a cooling of the economy to the point where the Fed feels like, oh boy, things are really starting to go south. We're going to have to lower rates to stimulate economic activity.
So you're saying you think that they will wait for the economy to start to go south before they drop the rates?
I do, yeah, because if
as in unemployment going up,
that would certainly be an indicator, but I think they're more keyed in on inflation going down.
Well, inflation right now is at 2.97%. You know, so it's like, how much more down, do you want it to go before we start to get to deflation here?
Well, there's a lot of different numbers in how inflation is measured. So I think the Fed still has an opinion that rates or inflation is too high. And I know there's core CPI, there's producer price index, there's a lot. So, but when the Fed adds it all up, they
consumer price is 0.2 and 3% over the last 12 months.
Right, and then there's food and energy and rents, and they add up a dizzying array of statistics, but mostly it's what they call, there's a certain stat that they call the personal consumption equivalent index, which is just another basket that they use, and some of them they strip out food and energy. But I think there's a growing sentiment, yes, that inflation is rolling over, and we can argue about how much and how fast. But so that's why you notice they paused the last meeting, and they're definitely slowing down. And it's just the question is, when do they lower rates?
Yeah, I mean, if you got like some of the mainline kind of indicators hovering at like 3%, I feel like it would be really, really crazy, especially with, if Powell is honest about what he says about wanting a soft landing. I think it would be like really, really crazy for him to come in and say, oh, we're going to raise it again by like 50 or 75 basis points.
I think so too, and especially it's universally agreed that monetary policy acts with a lag. So, we don't know what all the ripple effects are, and there's going to be serious ripple effects because people and companies will have debt that they issued or borrowed at 3% that's now going to be repriced closer to 7%. Right?
Meaning interest rate wise, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's going to mean people have to lay people off, and that's and that puts businesses under more pressure. Am I wrong about that?
It certainly puts them under more pressure. Yes, if they're highly levered.
And then that also puts at risk the labor market gains low-wage workers have made over the last year and a half or so.
I doubt it, only because those gains are sort of it just, I think they're pretty long overdue, and they're basically bringing it back to a modicum of balance, the balance between labor and capital.
But if there is more pressure put on I would agree they are long overdue, but I feel like if there's continued pressure put on unemployment rates and stuff like that, that's going to make there starts to be less, more people searching for jobs than there are jobs available, and then people aren't able to ask for higher wages across the board. Then that
everything I read
it's good
says that there's more job openings than there are people to fill them.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is if Powell continues along this line, that if that starts to flip, like it or not, that is going to erase, the current reality and erase a lot of these wage gains that have been happening for the first time in a long time.
That's why I think, the pause or maybe a slight increase is all that we're going to see. And in my mind, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
They have a lot of room to reverse course, and they've done that in the past. Powell has done that, where he's raised rates and then went, wow, I did that too quickly. Let me reverse direction. They don't like doing it, but it's certainly not out off the table. If unemployment starts rising, economic growth maybe turns slightly negative, I think you could expect a rate increase, and especially if some of what they call what I call euphemistically the plumbing of the securities markets, where blue chip companies can't borrow, and financing markets, which are in the trillions, if they stop working, that's when the Fed breaks out these programs to help things at least function again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be, definitely very interesting to see. It'll definitely be a hinge point moment for Powell here, because, you're seeing inflation going down. We're seeing, what he wants to see happen. But the question is, can he, bring the other side of it into the equation and, fold it all together into one nice, complete, soft landing. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Really do appreciate it. And
anytime.
We'll go to our next story. All right, so now, very quick, we're going to breeze through this Ron DeSantis stuff here. Point is, Ron DeSantis is not doing well. And I think it's become increasingly clear that the biggest problem for him is that, he's just him. He's unlikable in so many levels. He just combines all the worst parts of the Republican Party and the least populist parts of the Republican Party base kind of put together. And it's just, had to shed staff over the weekend, had to, do all these, very, very embarrassing, undesirable things. Just I believe it's 6 weeks before early voting starts. When is Iowa? I don't even know. Or 6 months. I don't know. I don't know. I think it's actually definitely 6 months before Iowa starts. But anyway, it is definitely kind of a rough time to be Ron DeSantis at this point. And he's in a position that I think it's very likely he could be out of the race before the end of the year, and Trump essentially has a coronation, because he's the first test he failed, and the only way he could have been even a possible considerable threat is if he scares out all the other moderates coming to the field, and he has not done that. It's a clown car primary, all throughout. There are all these, ridiculous people who have no bit, from anywhere from, if you're not even scaring Doug Burgum away from running for president, you are not doing very much. And it's really kind of a pathetic thing to see. At the start of the year, shortly after he had romped to re-election in Florida, DeSantis and Trump were neck and neck. A late June NBC poll found that DeSantis has dropped 9 points since April. And I'm willing to make a bold prediction here. Ron DeSantis is out of the race by the end of the year, by the end of the calendar year of 2023. Doesn't even make it to the first date, because it's just like, if he's already, in a cash crunch, already getting embarrassing fundraising numbers, already having to quote unquote reshuffle staff, he is donezo. He is done. Get out of here. Bye-bye, Ron. That's all I have to say. Anyway, let's go to our next and final story. A really good article in the Current Affairs magazine about how AOC went from influencer to influenced. So here it is here. From the author's name is Lily Sanchez. So she writes, here's what a 2020 vote for Biden has yielded us on the left. The $15 minimum wage, which was included in early COVID relief legislation, was effectively killed by an unelected Senate parliamentarian, a technicality the administration could have disregarded but chose not to. On student loan cancellation, the Supreme Court struck down the Biden administration's initial forgiveness plan. And by the way, the $15 minimum wage thing, this is one of the longest times that we've had an unchanged federal minimum wage. And by the way, people say, oh, it's so different now. All the states are raising it anyway. Well, a lot of states in the middle of the country are not. People are still working on that, and there is nowhere you can afford to live off of $7.25 for a 40-hour work week. And this is one of the things we were talking about on the last show. It's just, it would be so easy, so easy for the people, the business leaders, the politicians to just concede this one thing. Raise it up to $15. It's still well below kind of the value that they're producing and, where the wage really should be. It should be close to 25 if, you're doing it proportional to productivity. But, we are not seeing that. We are seeing instead a complete turn, a complete disregard for the kind of fundamentals of the situation, and a refusal to give people anything, just give them anything. So, and this includes a lot of the other policies. Calls in late 2020 by Brianna Joy Gray and others for AOC and the Squad, a term coined by AOC and 4 other progressives, including her and Tlaib, Omar, and Presley, which now includes Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, to act like a voting bloc and force a vote on Medicare for All in exchange for supporting Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker, was flatly rejected by AOC. She said there was an opportunity cost to weigh, which, I don't really get what that means. What is it? Nancy Pelosi is going to dislike you even more. She essentially already, got her under control. So it's like, this is very funny stuff. So this is what she said. Problem with the idea is there isn't enough thought given to step 2. Votes aren't there yet, and with a razor-thin margin, the Dem no's are greater than the margin. So you issue threats, hold your vote, and lose. Then what? If you want to know who's opposed, look at the co-sponsor list. In contrast, you can use leverage to push for things that can happen and change lives, i.e. $15 minimum wage, which, again, Biden administration, precedingly, following down from that, Pramila Jayapal, AOC, the Squad, all the rest of the progressives absolutely rolled over on. In the first 100 days, elevating longtime progressive champions to important positions of leadership, also doable. That's the opportunity cost away. So she essentially, fight for something more realistic, and she wouldn't even fight for something more realistic. So when independent reporter David Sirota asked AOC why the Medicare for All movement had apparently stalled, her first response was that the health insurance lobby is so incredibly powerful and that the insurance companies have a broader number of members that can be influenced by that. A statement of fact, of course, has nothing to do with what she and other progressives who didn't take corporate money are doing or not doing on healthcare. AOC gave another reason for the lack of movement on healthcare, the Senate filibuster. But the Democrats had all of 2021 to overturn the filibuster, and they refused. As Andrew Perez put it in Jacobin in June of 2021, Democrats, with their narrow Senate majority, have in their power the ability to end the filibuster. In fact, voting to change the rules and eliminate or reform the filibuster is one of the few things Democrats can actually do with 51 votes, and it would allow them to enact President Joe Biden's agenda at whatever pace they want. Instead, the party has consistently and deliberately opted for gridlock. What's worse, Biden noted in the same interview, the Biden administration has Sirota noted in the same interview as the Biden administration has lurched to the right, done all these, pretty bad policies. Another kind of interesting point that Sirota challenged AOC on in this interview was the kind of railroad strike, preemptively crushing the railroad strike at the end of 2022. Sirota pointed that AOC had voted 91% along party lines and asked AOC point blank why she and the Squad didn't go against the party or act as a voting bloc to advance progressive interests, particularly in the case of the vote on the rail workers. AOC's response was to blame everyone else, the workers who wanted to prioritize a vote on a sick leave provision, which, separate from the vote to make the strike illegal, failed in the Senate. The workers who weren't ready for a wild-class strike, and unnamed people on social media, she said, that were invested on sowing conflict in the left. The AOC of 2023 is defending a vote to stop rail workers who work grueling schedules from striking to obtain better conditions. But recall one of AOC's first notable actions, which I've said many times, she went all downhill from there, was to participate in the occupation of Pelosi's office. And she said she would support forcing a budget showdown in order to fight on immigration legislation. Scroll through AOC's social media timeline from 2018 and 19, and you see references to MLK and a serious expression of moral commitment to fighting injustice. What happened to the AOC of pre-2018, the one who said, if you're a one-term Congress member, so what? You can make 10 years worth of change in one term if you're not afraid. And she would not have been a one-term Congress member, no matter what, essentially. So it shows how she's completely, failed and just completely given up on a lot of this stuff. The media has attempted to answer the question of why AOC seems to have toned it down. As the New York Times explained in September of 2019, AOC has come off as a divisive outsider. 2 of her staff members have been quite outspoken against the party establishment, particularly on social media. There was the hints that she might support a primary challenger to Representative Hakeem Jeffries, who is now the minority leader and was rising in the party at the time, and that she and the other 3 squad members had voted no on a border aid package, which led to some unflattering public remarks about them by Nancy Pelosi. But now, with her 2 outspoken staff members gone, and after having a private, presumably sober meeting with Pelosi, AOC was learning how to balance her twin roles as a dissident and member of Congress. Which, by the way, I would love to have been a fly on the wall for that meeting, because apparently Pelosi, in multiple times, so the Iron Dome vote, and apparently in this meeting, just bitched her the hell out. There was a mainstream media profile talking about how she's now adhering to the rules she once disdained. A more recent profile from Puck from March of this year reports AOC has become subdued and party line towing, inviting speculation she's either playing three-dimensional chess or diligently earning her stripes on the Hill. Spoiler alert, it's the latter. But what these articles fail to capture is that there's no careful political calculus or three-dimensional chess game for an official, certainly not one that calls themselves a socialist, working to advance the interests of ordinary people against a government that mostly serves the rich and corporations. And all movements attempting to make fundamental change, not superficial reform, depend on agitators to win. More subdued AOC is simply an ineffective, not strategic AOC. As Jordan Balog argued in Current Affairs last year, progressives have failed to act confrontational enough to win an agenda that's popular with the public, such as Medicare for all, student debt cancellation, $15 minimum wage, and more. The left will never win through backroom deal politics. That's the establishment's turf. We will only win with grassroots social movements and organized labor working alongside our allies in the office to mobilize their base. He concluded, citing the example of the movement work by Socialist Alternative and Shama Sawant, Seattle's open socialist and Market City Council member since 2014, who has resulted in wins on the local level such as a $15 minimum wage, tax on Amazon, and city ban on caste discrimination. As inspiring as the rise of AOC and other squad members has been, it's been clear they remain bound by a party that refuses to address the most pressing issues of our time. So yeah, it's pretty clear. It's very pretty clear that I think it sums it up. I think it really does sum up pretty well. What we see from AOC, that last part, and it's why some of the squad has been failing to make any major impacts, because they just have completely fallen into the Washington crevice. It's like the black pit, in Greek mythology, that they just pull you in there and you're just unable to come out. It's like, I have to play with the rule, play along with the rules. I have to go to the meetings, have to be nice to everyone. It's like, it's not like you have to go around shouting at everyone all the time. Be perfectly nice, be perfectly personable, but you have the power. You can try and, you literally organize yourself into a squad. You show up at these Teamsters rallies. What's stopping you from working with the Teamsters some of the, she's just unable to, I think has proven unable, and some of this could be on, some of the intransigence of the DSA or whatever, but, they have been there. I think they have a lot of respect. It's dwindling, but they have a lot of respect for AOC. I mean, why can't she just simply, take the time, take the ability to work with these people and actually do some sort of, aggression, let's see some, organization. The Justice Democrats, who are also now falling apart, they were intended to be the Tea Party of the left, and they have essentially been nothing of the sort. So with that being said, I think we're going to end it right there. We'll be back on Wednesday. Let's see this flash.